Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of such novels as Touch Your Nose and Jacoby Street, and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today. Well, welcome to another very special episode of the Write Project podcast. I know I say that they are all special, but this one is especially so. We are on the line with Tzu-Hao Hsu. She is one of the authors from Us Now, a new collection from Breakwater Books featuring the Quilted Collective of Writers and edited by Lisa Moore. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
No worries. So you wrote a story called Across Oceans, which I've read twice now, and I think I get it, and I really, really like it, but I'm not sure I like the way it ends. It ends in this very, just nostalgic kind of, hopeful sentence kind of thing, and I enjoy it. To me, it's about longing, like that kind of, across ocean kind of thing, and wanting to be almost in two places at once. But that's not for me to say. Tell me what your story's about in your words.
I mean, I'm glad that's how you interpreted the story, because that's kind of part of the intention. So Across Oceans is basically details a family's journey from, immigrating from their homeland to settling in Newfoundland, but it's told through the second person perspective of the father in the family, who makes the very difficult decision to stay behind in the homeland in order to provide for the family. So you have a family of four that's split in two different places across, as the title suggests, physical oceans, but also across oceans of years, and the differences in how you grow and how being physically immersed in different cultures could separate you, but at the same time bring you together. So as you say that in the story, there are moments of hope, moments of joy, and there's also moments of the pain and the longing that comes with being apart from your family. So, I had envisioned this story as sort of a tribute and a love letter, because it's very loosely based on my family's experience, and some of the elements in there are inspired by friends and acquaintances I've met over the years who have gone through similar circumstances. So it's a love letter to families that have made sacrifices in order to triumph and then come to a better life for their descendants and the family comes after. But it's also sort of a love letter to, rotational workers who also have to be in that situation, albeit the circumstances are a little bit differently, but you make that choice to be away from your family in order to provide for them, knowing that this is how you express your love, and that's something really dear and near to me.
Yeah, it's so hard, that situation with the rotational worker and just being away in this situation too, just making the choice to be away from someone for the betterment of them is a very painful choice. Like that's a lot,
It certainly is. And, as someone who actually lived through that, it's inspired a very different relationship between. So like in our case, it was also our father who was away, as it was in the story. So in a way, like it's almost easy for me to guess how the characters might feel, but then of course it depends on your relationship with the person and the circumstances. You could have very different outcomes. I don't want to spoil the story for those who want to choose, but there is a very important question that gets asked in that story.
Yep.
And sometimes when you ask that particular question, depending on how things go, it isn't always the answer that you expect. So I'll leave it at that.
Yep. It's interesting. In some ways, it's like you were saying. It's like there are multiple layers within layers, and like any good story, it's on some level universal. You know what I mean? While being specific to you, there's also a certain universality to it. I couldn't help but think about my grandfather, who I never met, when my mom was little, he was a lighthouse keeper, and this was in the time before telephones and before much electricity in the province and stuff like that, in this really small outport. So
Mhm.
he was away for sometimes 4 months at a time on the lighthouse. They could see the lighthouse from their outport, but they couldn't see him.
Mhm.
Like there was no way to communicate, you know? Yeah,
Yeah, that's
just
positively fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, just to be that close and that far, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes that's harder, isn't it? That you can see it, but you can't touch them and see them or hear them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a very very different kind of distance to have to work through. So kudos to your family. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Kudos all around.
Yeah.
But how did this story come to you, if I can ask? Tell me about the process of writing it, because it's really good. I just adored it.
Thank you. I mean, so like I said, it's sort of a tribute to my family, right? But also it's a tribute to the whole immigrant experience. And I know when folks think of immigrants, they tend to think racialized folks. But if you think about it, like even before the Southeast Asians or the Chinese or the more visible racialized folks start immigrating to the country, you also have a lot of European descendants that would probably have gone through similar experiences. So it's a story, you know, on the surface about immigration, but it's really the migration of humans across and the world and the footprints that we leave behind and how that affects how we view ourselves and define who we are.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. That's heartbreaking. Every story in this collection's a little bit heartbreaking. I oh man. I have to ask, like, so was is did to your knowledge, did everyone kind of write semi autobiographically? Like, it seems like the people I've spoken to with this, they're drawing from themselves, which makes sense. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think for many of us, a few of us are very established professional writers, but that's not the case with all of us. So I guess when you're when you're first stepping out to explore your identity as a writer, you probably reach for things that are near and dear so that you know it's authentic and that you can speak in that voice and know that you're telling the truth. So that's perhaps why many of us reach for an experience that's perhaps inspired by our own experiences or at least someone close to us that we can offer more authentic and in-depth detail to the nature of the stories.
Sure. Okay. All right. I like it. I like it. Let's see here. Were there any other stories in the collection, like not to like make you play favorites or anything like that, but did you have any other? I asked this of the last person I interviewed from the collection as well. Was there another story in it besides you, or another couple of stories that you were really drawn to? That, like, I'm assuming you've read them and read their work. Is there one that I'm not gonna make you pick a favorite, but let's say give me one of your favorites.
One of my favorites.
I'm assuming they're all your favorite, but you
They
know,
really are. And I mean, one of the big discoveries and gifts that I received from participating in this group is actually meeting the writers and hearing all the different backgrounds. So, um, you know, like having that opportunity to experience what it was like for someone else to come to this country and then how it differs and how it's similar and how ultimately like there's a lot of universality in our experiences and I imagine that is also applicable to any other type of migrant activity. So but there's one in particular actually. Am I allowed to pick two? My goodness.
sure,
So
go crazy.
I'm very very fond of Sobia Sheikh Shaheen's story, Softly with Nyat. I'm also very, very fond of Nabila Qureshi's story. Now, the title eludes me at the moment, but Sobia's story is about a woman's struggle in I guess, a marriage in a very traditional culture and how that impacts her growth and development as a person over the years. And some of the, again, back to decisions, sacrifices, and choices that she make to keep the peace of the family, for the joy of the children, for what she had hoped was going to continue to be a good marriage. And things go a certain way. and that's not necessarily the happy ending that people expect, but it's a beautiful growth of the character that you see through the years. In Nabila's story, it seems like it's a letter that the writer perhaps writes to herself about her future aspirations, dreams, and hopes, and how perhaps she could travel the world and come back to her hometown and bring all that back with her so that she can nurture the next generation. And so in Nabila, Sophia, and my cultures, like I mean, as it is with all cultures, I guess, family is a very important part of our identity. But for me, like I also have a really strong sense of attachment to where I came from. So the idea of trying to be, I guess, contribute to the next generation, that building of heritage, of legacy, and what it means to find yourself and then help others find themselves in this great wide world of ours. Like that's fascinating and it's just heartwarming. And then both of these women have this absolutely beautiful, poetic, and lyrical rhythm to their writing. You just can't help but really dive into the words, and you feel like you're even when the circumstances are harsh in these stories, you still feel like you're being cradled and cocooned in this amazing experience that you emerge from it, someone inspired and changed. And I just think it's fabulous.
Okay, that is amazing. So those are the stories, At the Stroke of Midnight and Softly with Niet.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Did I say that last part right, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I think you're
Okay.
pretty close.
Okay. Oh my. Wonderful. Well, that is brilliant. Everyone should go out and check out this collection. It's available everywhere, but like, please, for God's sake, it's just a wonderful, wonderful bunch of stories. I adored it. It was magical fiction.
Thank you so much. And I mean, really, like I said, in the process of, I guess, participating in the creation of it, and then coming to even go through the process of what it's like to publish and work as a group, and then seeing each other's works come to life and get that opportunity to get feedbacks, and then seeing how that make the words on the pages dance and come to life. It was just spectacular. And I, not trying to be a little marketing whatever here, but it's a collection of stories from voices that people might not necessarily associate with Newfoundland, but these are voices that are underrepresented, but really probably have always been here in some way, shape, or form. So I like to think that I know there's a stereotype about what a Newfoundland Labrador looks like, and there is a very predominant narrative that's been present. But in between the spaces, there have always been enough room for these other more diverse stories, whether you're a racialized person, you're Indigenous, you're LGBTQ plus community, or you're just someone who, doesn't necessarily feel attached to that popular story that people think of a Newfoundlander. So it's nice to have this opportunity to present this and let everyone else know that, like, there are Newfoundlanders born and raised, they're Newfoundlanders by choice, and at the end of the day, we're all Newfoundlanders, and this place inspires all of us.
Absolutely. There's this wonderful book. I love what you just said, and I'm gonna talk about it for a second in a way that I don't mean to diminish it at all or anything like that. But there's this wonderful book called Why Nations Fail. I love anthropology. I took it as my minor and stuff like that. And it was one book. It wasn't assigned to us. I tend to read anthropological texts for fun now. like a lunatic would. You know what I mean?
Oh, no. Like a learned scholar, my dear.
Yeah. I'm an armchair anthropologist now.
That's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I love this book, and it talks about, there's this one section, it's basically it's why nations, it's what the title is, Why Nations Fail. The whole text kind of comes to a conclusion that part of why nations fail, and a main reason, is the fear of creative destruction, like the fear that something new will destroy the old and destroy what came before it. So it's almost like imagine your body, if your cells didn't split and regenerate, you die. You know what I mean? But it's people trying to keep it. And I feel like the marketing around Newfoundland has been very like, we've been trapped in this 1950 to 1960 bubble. From my point of view, personally, like the Newfoundland cultural bubble. I'm a science fiction and horror writer, and it was really hard to get your work out there because no one would. It's a very, I mean, that's a very different thing than what you're talking about. But just that idea that like, no, we can't do it here because it doesn't fit in the bubble, and I hate that bubble. I absolutely despise it. Newfoundlanders can look like anything and can be anything, you know?
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you. It's I don't want to be like the white guy who's like, no, I'm disenfranchised, but like because I hate that. But like when people say like, I hate when people say like, why don't you write about Newfoundland things or what? Or so I'm like, I'm a Newfoundlander. I can't actually write about anything different. I just like, anything I write is Newfoundland literature, and it makes me pull out my hair. And yeah, no, sorry, it's an agitating attitude.
That's okay, and I absolutely understand that because it's something that I've noticed coming here. So I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I left there when I was 11. But I was a very avid reader even as a child, and I remember going to bookstores in Taiwan. You would get Taiwanese literature, Chinese literature, Japanese literature, and European and African and Middle Eastern literature sections. So there are all these wealth of books that you could access for purchase or sometimes even in libraries to borrow, and they are available in both translator or original languages. But that's not something I've ever seen in most of the North American market, to be honest, in places where I've been. So it's that. I mean, I don't want to say that's like a problem, but I feel like that approach, it's, I don't want to call it narrow-minded, but I feel like by doing so, you're robbing people of all these possibilities of seeing so much other different creative materials and historical like inspirations and things like that could help you enrich yourself as a culture. And it's just it's a little bit short-sighted, I guess, and perhaps a bit of favoritism or even maybe it's fear. I'm not quite sure, but it's just it seems like there's an opportunity available somewhere to introduce more materials that are somehow being held back for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, big time. Like, and it's really interesting because I mean you'll get idiots, complete morons who are like kind of try to do the reverse racism thing. We're way off track, but I don't care. I like what we're
That's
talking
okay.
about.
Go for it. I love it.
like an author that's writing about another ethnicity and doing it badly, and there's backlash, and then they'll point to, well, these people can write about our culture. Why is that okay? And it's like, because they're steeped in it. Like everyone knows what it's like to be a white middle class American because that's what all media is. Like it's you are just drenched in it. You know what I mean? Like all these translations that make it even like to all sides of the world that just this is what we are.
Yeah, there's a very dominant idea of what what Western culture looks like coming as someone who was born in Eastern culture. So that's very interesting to see it and experience, and then have that node comparison and how it's portrayed in literature, media, pop culture, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very fascinating, actually.
It is. It is. I'm always trying to seek out science fiction and fantasy and horror from other cultures because I find it really, really just interesting the different takes on stuff, like fantasy especially. Like so much of fantasy is derived from Tolkien and described from like what we would call fantasy, like is derived from like European, like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table influences. It's really interesting to see fantasy from other cultures that's just divorced from that entirely.
Okay, so if you like fantasy, are you also a fan of martial arts by any chance?
That's interesting. I tend not to like it to watch movies like it, but or anything like that. I tend to be I tend to stray away from movies where there's any kind of violence or anything like that.
Okay. If you're, it might possibly be a genre for you to explore. It's called wuxia. It's a Chinese fantasy where think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in a book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you know that the martial arts that they do in it also, although intricate, like, I mean, people don't actually fly.
Yeah.
And I know when that movie first came out, people were absolutely, got up and walked out of the theater because like that's impossible. And it's like, well, but you say that's impossible, but yet Star Trek and Star Wars exist. It's for
I
the same
heard.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
So wuxia is I read that genre a lot when I was a kid, and in also trying to keep up with the ability of reading and understanding Mandarin Chinese.
Okay.
So there's a gentleman named Jing Yong who basically pioneered and like mastered this genre if from the 50s onward, and he only passed away fairly recently. But he was a journalist first, and then he ventured into this type, and he has a collection that's each story can be read standalone, featuring different characters, but it's actually 14 books in a whole series that spans about 4 or 5 dynasties in China. And the first word in each of the titles composes a matching poem. It's brilliant.
I love it.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna check that out. When I go to edit this, I'm gonna be like looking it up based
perfect.
on what we just said. Awesome. Brilliant. Okay. I love getting new literature. I read about 500 books a year because I'm an insane person. So new literature is always fun. What are common traps for aspiring authors, in your opinion? What are cognitive traps or pitfalls, mistakes that young authors make?
I think when everyone's first start out trying to be a writer, you think you have nailed a masterpiece right away, but that's really not how it happens. I mean, you write and you perfect your craft, and like you're. I mean, I'm sure there are some talented individuals that hit the nail on the head on the first go, but for most people, the act of creation and improvement is where you get to your next level and continue, and then that's how you find that's how you polish and find that gem that eventually gets you the recognition.
Yeah. No, it's amazing the amount of authors that or artists in general that think they have to be perfect right off the bat. And if you compare it to literally any other discipline, it's revealed how stupid that is. Like, do you think that someone started running their first day of the Olympics, or you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, that's insane.
I completely understand, but I think there's this strange because I guess by the time you are known, you're already successful in that fashion. So most people feel like oh, this is a debut novel, this is a showcase and whatever, and there's that pressure and expectation. But I think that you know you have to remember the creative process is, just for lack of a better comparison, it's the iceberg, right? Like you see the tip of it or you see the podium, but underneath it is years and years of working through what inspires you, finding your own voices, and what works for you and what doesn't, and how you stitch that together to make it your work, and that it feels authentic and it inspires you and it makes you proud and stuff like that.
And like, I don't know what I think authors don't realize at some level. A lot of authors, but like let's say your early stuff wasn't great.
Mhm.
Like let's say you produce 10 books in your life, okay, and the 10th one is just a massive hit. Everyone loves it, critical darling. Everyone adores it. You're a worldwide bestseller, giving talks everywhere. That kind of fantasy. People will retroactively go back, critics, and say how much they loved your first 9, no matter how much they ignored them at the start. Like I love J.R.R. Tolkien. The Hobbit's a great book. The rest of it's utter trash. But like, because we love The Hobbit so much, we go and read Tree and Leaf and say that's good. I'm like, there's a reason that wasn't like all the unfinished tales. I'm like, there's a reason they weren't published. Like,
No, I understand, and I think part of that is it's the marketing machine.
what did you do with the first money that you made from writing? That first check, whether it was for a short story or an essay or whatever, that first bit of money, what did you do with it?
Took my mother out for supper.
That's a good answer. I like that.
Now she didn't eat the entire check, but
Okay. That's good. That's a good distinction. Which, I mean, if she did, it could mean one or two things. Like, oh wow, you ate that much, or oh wow, the check was that small. And I'd believe either, you know?
We'll leave that to the imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. If you took your writing life, your writing self, your body of work, and through a magic spell turned it into an animal, what animal would that be?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. A very sentimental chimera.
Okay. Okay. That is the second fictional animal from this one. Your writing compatriot Xavier said it was a unicorn.
Okay.
I'm interested to see if we'll get all imaginary beasts. It's going to be fun. Yep. Okay. Tzu-Hao, what does success in this industry look like to you? Every writer kind of like moves the goalpost, like, oh, success is here. And then when they reach it, they're like, success is here. Mm-hmm. For you right now, at this moment in time, what's success?
I write because I want to keep a record, whether that, even through fiction, of what I and those that I care for and have inspired me have gone through. So it's more about heritage and legacy for me at this point. I mean, for me, there's something really magical about the written word in my experience. And I mean, it's always been something that's been really fascinating. Like my parents used to laugh that, if you find me a really good piece of paper and a really, really smooth pen, you can entertain me for hours. And that's still true to this day. So for me, it's success is, I mean, I know some people think it's monetary, it's, the fame and the fortune and whatever that inspires you. And that's okay too. I mean, for folks who create professionally, that is a component of their success. But for me right now, is just the opportunity to tell a story that probably has been told before, but perhaps not recorded. So for me, that the fact that it now shows up in print is a huge thing for me. So right now I'm quite pleased and happy with that.
Good. I'm glad. That's cool. I like that. That's a very cool goal, and that's very honest and self-aware. I want to say, we usually get answers like win this award or make X amount of money or something like that. That's an interesting one, because that you actually might achieve a thing. Like, whereas most authors, like I said, they reach something. I think most authors are looking for like to fill a hole, or maybe even just want to feel like a real author. Mm-hmm. And like, really, there's no external thing that can fix that lack of self-validation within you. So they just look for that validation somewhere else, and then when they get it, they say, nope, that wasn't it, and off they go to the next success point. And
I mean, maybe that's how it motivates some people, and I think that's a perfectly fine way of conducting yourself as a writer, because I mean, for some people, again, if they create professionally, then that's their means of making a living. And if your passion and your messages happens to also be financially successful, then that's, all the more power and, inspiration to you. I think that sounds great. But
oh yeah,
for me, I'm of very humble origins, and I'm happy to stay that way.
Okay, all right, I like it. Fun. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Write Project podcast. This has been absolutely lovely. Everyone, please check out Us Now and everything from the entire Quilted Collective, and hopefully you'll come on again soon.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time, or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in, and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.